طيب. الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Abu Shahada, can you hear just fine? ممتاز. طيب. Alright, so now يا إخوان وأخوات we're going to begin with the chapter. ها؟ ما سميت؟ أبد.
بس يا إخوان يا أخوان خلاص.
عجيب. بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. I didn't say that? عجيب أنا آسف.
Everything is recorded.
طيب خلاص.
Rehearse it so you can hear it.
بسم الله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله.
توفيق إن شاء الله.
وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. جزاك الله خير. If I missed جزاك الله خير, I appreciate your reminding me.
Yes.
طيب. All right, so inshallah ta'ala we're going to start with the 5th chapter. باب الخوف من الشرك. I'm sorry, the 4th chapter. باب الخوف من الشرك. Chapter Fear of a Shirk. So the author, after he provided us with ample incentive to embrace at-Tawhid and to strive in earnest to be monotheist in the purest sense of the word. So he gives us ample incentive. First he starts off with basically the chapter Bab Wujub at-Tawhid al-A'yan, the chapter which clarifies the obligation of at-Tawhid upon every single individual. Then after that, Fadl Tawhid, Babu Fadl Tawhid, wa ma yukaffir min al-dhunub. Then after that, the virtue, the merit, the excellence of Tawhid and what it expiates of sins. And then after that, man yuhaqqiq at-Tawhid, dakhil al-Jannah, bila hisab wa la adhab. The one who actualizes or realizes Tawhid will enter paradise without any reckoning or any punishment. So now he's given us ample what? Ample incentive. Ample incentive to be people who are keen to embrace the Tawhid and to strive in earnest to be monotheists in the purest sense. So now he does that, now after he's done that, he brings a chapter entitled Al-Khawf min al-Shirk. So the first 3 chapters, they contained tarhib. They contained inducement. He's encouraging us, he's inciting us. And now he brings a chapter where he gives us what? A targhib. I'm sorry, the first chapters were targhib. He's inciting, he's inducing. And now he brings a chapter where he gives us what? A tarhib. Where he's going to give us frightful discouragement. From what? From the opposite of a tawhid, which is what? A shirk. Polytheism, idolatry, or associating partners with Allah, setting up rivals with Allah. And why does the Imam do this? Because when I tell you, if you do this, you're going to get this. If you do this, you're going to get that. That gives you hope. Wallah, gives you hope. If I tell you, if you do this, this is going to be the consequence. This is going to be the harm that comes with that. That gives you what? Fear. Ibn al-Qayyim and other scholars have mentioned that these 2 emotions, hope and fear, they're like the 2 wings of a bird. When a bird has 2 wings, he flies what? He flies level. He's balanced. And this is what hope and fear they do for the believer. They create what? Balance. And they keep the believer moderate and keep him from going to either extreme. When he has hope, hope is like that carrot on the stick. That keeps him what? Keeps him moving forward toward his objective, hoping to ultimately what? Obtain that promised reward, that reward that's in front of him. That's the effect of what? Of hope. That's the effect of at-targhib. And on the other side of the coin, those warnings about what consequences a person will face if they do this or do that, that's like what? That's like a whip that you use to what? To drive the animal forward And the animal drives forward and keeps marching because he doesn't want what? He doesn't want that whip. He doesn't want that consequence. So that's the effect of hope and fear together, is that they make you balanced. Hope pushes you forward because you're seeking that reward. Fear pushes you forward because you fear the consequence of non-compliance. But what if you have one without the other? If you have hope by itself, then what that does is that makes you negligent in many cases. Makes you negligent, makes you overconfident, and you tend to do what? Rely on Allah's mercy and His generosity. When you have too much hope, then you tend to do what? Rest on your laurels. Allah is merciful. من حقق التوحيد دخل الجنة بلا عذاب ولا بلا حساب ولا عذاب. من قال لا إله إلا الله دخل الجنة. You start saying things like this and you think about what Allah promised, and you don't think about what you have to do to fulfill that promise. Because Allah is merciful, Allah is generous, He promised this, He promised that. You start relying on those promises. So this is the fear if you have too much hope and you don't have any what? Fear to compensate. Okay? Or to balance it. On the other side of the coin, if you have fear and no hope, what does that do for you? It creates despair. When you're afraid and you have no hope, you despair. You think that there's no benefit, it's a lost cause, because Allah is going to punish the one who does this, the one who does that, etc. So that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala throughout the Quran, whenever He gives us at-Targhib, He follows it with what? At-Tarhib. And when He gives us tarhib, when He frightens us, He follows it with what? At-Targhib. He mentions the people of hellfire. Then He follows it with the people of what? Jannah. Look at the Quran. Even al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. The most beneficent, the most merciful. Malik Yawmiddin. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim fills you with what? Hope. He's the most merciful, so I have every reason to hope, to expect that He'll show mercy. But just so that I don't become over-dependent, over-reliant on His mercy, and I don't fulfill my responsibilities, Allah follows it by saying, what? Maliki? Maliki Yawmiddin. The king of the day of judgment. The king of the day when people will divide into two groups. Fariqun fil Jannah wa fariqun fil Sa'ir. A group in paradise and a group in the hellfire. And this targhib and tarhib, it does what? It keeps us balanced, ya ikhwani. So the Imam, following that sunnah, the sunnah of Allah in the Quran, and the sunnah of the Messenger is a hadith, he gave us what? Targhib. 3 chapters where he filled us with love for a Tawhid and longing for the reward that we stand to gain from a Tawhid. And then he follows it with what? Bab al-Khawf min shirk. Fearing what? Shirk. O muwahid. Don't just focus all of your intention on what you stand to gain from a Tawhid. Realize that there are consequences for falling short and falling into a shirk. So now what the author does, Jazakallah khair, is he mentions 5 adillah, 5 proof texts, which indicate to us the requirement for every individual to be afraid of a shirk, to fear it. And if he fears it, then he needs to what? Do all he can to avoid it. And in order to avoid it, he has to actually know what it is. So when he fears, then he wants to avoid. When he wants to avoid, then he has to seek the knowledge necessary, required, to know what it is so he can avoid it. And this is important. This chapter is really important because many people nowadays, they belittle the study of a Tawhid, and they ridicule those who are afraid of falling into a shirk. They say, come on, why are you afraid of a shirk? We don't live in the time of idols. We don't live in the time when people worship idols. Why are people making such a big deal out of shirk and telling people to be afraid of a shirk when we live in a time where people are very civilized? Wallahi, ikhwan, people worship idols today. They worship real idols. Some Muslims worship idols. They worship tombs. But not just that, there are lots of idols which are not what? They're not tangible, but they're still worshipped by what? By Muslims and non-Muslims, like a dunya. A dunya becomes what? A god besides Allah. And people make shirk with what? With the dunya. So that being the case, it's important for the Muslim to realize that fearing a shirk is something what? Is something which is just as applicable today as it was in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Al-Muhim, the author is going to provide us with a dillah which will strengthen us and fortify us and make us see clearly why we should be afraid of a shirk. So the first dalil he mentions from the Quran is a statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah An-Nisa, in which he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرْ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ لِمَن يَشَاءُ. Indeed, Allah does not forgive the sin of associating partners with Him, but He forgives what is less than that to whomever He pleases. So what this ayah teaches us is that a shirk is an unforgivable sin. If one commits it and dies while committing it, he will not be forgiven by Allah. So this necessitates a sin that will not be forgiven under any circumstances. That necessitates that you do what? That you fear it. A sin that if you do it, you won't be forgiven. You should be afraid of that. And if you're afraid of it, it necessitates you avoiding it. And if you avoid it, that necessitates, in order for you to avoid it, you have to know what it is. You have to be able to distinguish it from what? From a tawhid, a shirk from a tawhid. As the poet said, عرفت الشر لا للشر ولكن لتواقيه ومن لم يعرف الشر وقع فيه. Said, I learned about evil not for the sake of evil, but to avoid it. And whoever does not know what evil is will do what? Will fall into it. So this is the thing that in addition to al-khawf min al-shirk, fearing it, we have to what? Know what it is so we can avoid it. Then he brings the second dalil. And that's the statement of Ibrahim, mentioned by Allah in the Quran, in Surah Ibrahim, the 14th surah, verse 35. He says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَجُنُوبْنِي وَبَنِيَّ أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ. He said, and keep me and my sons away from worshipping the idols, the false deities. So now how does this ayah tell us that fearing a shirk is mandatory? Alright, in this ayah, who's speaking? وَجُنُوبْنِي وَبَنِيَّ نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ. Who's speaking? Who is Ibrahim? Ibrahim is not only one of the greatest messengers of Allah, he is what? The quintessential example of a Tawhid. The quintessential example of a Muwahhid. He is the golden standard of a Muwahhid. And this golden standard Muwahhid, who Allah repeatedly refers to as what? Hanif, Hanif, Hanif. Throughout the Quran, this golden standard, he himself is afraid, not just for himself, but also for his what? His offspring, of falling into a shirk. He's afraid for himself, and he's afraid for his offspring. So this is the quintessential example of a Tawheed. The one who Allah repeatedly calls al-Hanif. He's afraid of a shirk. So if he's afraid of a shirk, and this is where he is in terms of a Tawheed, how about the people who are on a lower level? The people who are on a level lower than him, they have to be even more afraid of a shirk. So that means every believer who is obviously less than Ibrahim in terms of a Tawheed has to be equally afraid, if not more afraid, of falling into a shirk. So this ayah teaches us that we have to be afraid of a shirk. It's required to be afraid of a shirk from two angles. The first angle is that Ibrahim feared it for himself. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. He feared it for himself, so those who are less than him should be even more afraid, as Ibn Jarir has collected on, and also Ibn Abi Hatim. They've collected on the authority of Ibrahim at-Taymi. That Ibrahim at-Taymi, he said, وَمَنْ يَأْمَنْ الْبَلَاءِ بَعْدِ Ibrahim. He said, and who can feel safe from the trial of associating partners with Allah after Ibrahim, or besides Ibrahim? If Ibrahim doesn't feel safe, no one else should feel safe. So that's the first indication that this fear of a shirk is mandatory. The second indication is that Allah has ordered us in the Quran to follow who? To follow Ibrahim. And to try to be like him. Allah has made this mandatory. He made it mandatory. He said, وَاتَّبِعُوا مِلَّةَ إِبْرَاهِيمَ حَنِيفًا. Follow the religious path of Ibrahim Hanifan, the religious path of Islamic monotheism. So we were ordered by Allah in the Quran to follow Ibrahim, and from his example is to be what? To be afraid of a shirk. So there's no shame. There's no shame. It's not uncivilized, it's not backward in the 21st century to be afraid of a shirk. Because it's part of what? Of our deen to follow Ibrahim, who was afraid of a shirk. طيب, ثم بعد ذلك the Imam, he mentioned the third dalil, and that's the hadith collected by Ahmed, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said to his companions, أَخْوَفُ مَا أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ الشِّرْكِ الْأَصْغَرِ. He said, that which I fear for you the most is the minor shirk. So then they asked him, well, what is this minor shirk? He said, ar-riya. He said it is ostentation or showing off. So now this hadith proves that we have to be afraid of a shirk, because the Prophet ﷺ, when he's speaking, he's addressing who? Who's he talking to? His companions. Who are the companions? They are the best of people after the Anbiya. As the Prophet ﷺ said in the hadith of Ibn Umar, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ. He said, the best of people is my nation, my community, my generation. And then those who follow them, and then those who follow them. So he's speaking to the best of people. They're the most knowledgeable and the most faithful of people. But in spite of this, the Prophet was afraid that they might fall into a shirk. He was afraid that they might fall into what? A shirk. And he specifically mentioned the minor shirk. If the Prophet is afraid for these people, the companions, the most faithful of people, that they might fall into the minor shirk, then it's more right that we fear for ourselves what? The major shirk. Wadah ya ikhwan? That makes sense? You got that? So if they're up here, and the Prophet is afraid that they might commit shirk, the people who are less than them have to even be more afraid that they might commit a shirk. So that's 3 adillah. The first one is, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ. Allah doesn't forgive associating partners. The second one, the statement of Ibrahim, وَجُنُوبَنِي وَبَنِيَ أَن نَعْبُدَ الْأَصْنَامِ. Protect me and my son, my offspring from worshipping the idols. So Ibrahim was afraid. The third one, أَخْوَفُ مَا أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ. The thing which I fear most for you. The Prophet's afraid for the companions. So those who are less than the companions should be even more afraid. Now we come to the fourth dalil, and that's the hadith of Ibn Mas'ud, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَنْ مَاتَ وَهُوَ يَدْعُ مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ نِدًّا دَخَلَ النَّارِ. Whoever dies while ascribing partners to Allah or calling on other than Allah will enter the hellfire. So here is another dalil, or another indication that we have to be afraid of a shirk. And that is because the one who commits a shirk, his abode, his punishment, his destination will be the hellfire. And it's required for the believer not only to fear the hellfire, but to fear everything which could lead to the hellfire. And the Prophet is telling us that one of the principal things that will lead to the hellfire is a shirk. So we have to be afraid of a shirk because it can lead, or it will lead, to the hellfire. But the final dalil he mentions is the hadith collected by Muslim on the authority of Jabir, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said, مَنْ لَقِيَ اللَّهِ لَا يُشْرِكُ بِهِ شَيْئًا دَخَلَ الْجَنَّةِ وَمَنْ لَقِيَهُ وَهُوَ يُشْرِكُ بِهِ شَيْئًا دَخَلَ النَّارِ. He said, so whoever meets Allah on the day of judgment while having associated no partners with Allah will enter the paradise. And whoever meets him while associating partners with him will enter the hellfire. So now, this, in addition, this is similar to the previous hadith, but it has an additional meaning. And that is that not only will the person enter the hellfire, but he'll be prohibited from entering what? Al-Jannah. And this is key, because a person can say, well, I might enter the hellfire, but ultimately I'll be taken out. But no, this hadith tells us no. Not only will he enter the hellfire, but he won't be allowed to enter where? Paradise. Just like the believer has to be afraid of the hellfire and everything can lead to the hellfire, He has to be afraid of everything that can bar him, ban him from entering paradise. That's why we have all those hadith where the Prophet says, whoever does this, لَا يَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةَ مَنْ, he will not enter paradise, the one who does this. He will not enter paradise, the one who does that. Why does the Prophet do that? Because when we're told that we'll be banned from paradise if we do this, that's supposed to make us what? Avoid it. Because we're supposed to be afraid of anything that can ban us from paradise. So for example, the Prophet said, لَا يَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةَ عَاقٍ, right? The one who is disobedient to his parents will not enter paradise. And he said, لَا يَدْخُلُ الْجَنَّةَ مَنْ كَانَ فِي قَلْبِهِ مِثْقَالُ ذَرَّةٍ مِنْ كِبْرٍ or مِنْ الْكِبْرِ. He said he will not enter paradise, the one who has a mustard seed's weight of pride in his heart. So he mentions these hadith. He will not enter paradise, the one who does this, the one who does that. So we'll be afraid of that thing, because the believer is supposed to be afraid of anything that can ban him or bar him from entering paradise. Likewise the case with what? A shirk. A shirk, not only will it cause a person to enter the hellfire, but it can also do what? Cause a person to be totally banned from entering the paradise. Wazi akhwan? So these are the 5 adillah that he mentioned that indicate that a believer has to be afraid of a shirk. What was the first dalil? Help me, let's review real quickly. Huh? Inna Allah la yaghfir. It's an unforgivable sin. Second one, the statement of Ibrahim, وَجْنُوبِي وَبَنِيَّ and Nabul Islam. Ibrahim was afraid, and he's the quintessential example, role model, golden standard of Tawhid. So if he's afraid, we have to be more afraid. طيب ممتاز. طيب, what was the third one? أَخْوَفُ مَا أَخَافُ عَلَيْكُمْ. The Prophet is afraid for his companions that they might commit a shirk, so we have to be more afraid because they're on a much higher level. So if they can fall, most certainly those who are beneath them can fall. But number 4 was the fourth one. مَنْ مَاتَ وَهُوَ يُشْرِكُ بِاللَّهِ شَيْئًا دَخَلَ النَّارِ. That a shirk requires a person to do what? Into the hellfire. We're supposed to be afraid of anything which could lead to the hellfire. What's the last one? That it can do what? It can cause you to be banned from paradise. Mumtaz. Any questions about that? We're going to the next chapter. Fi shay? Mumtaz. So now the Shaykh, he brings the 5th chapter. And he says, Babu da'wa or Babu du'a ila shahadati an la ilaha illallah. He says the chapter inviting others to testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah. So now the Imam, he mentioned at-Tawhid. He mentioned its merit, its excellence, and its mandatory nature. The virtue of the one who realizes it, who actualizes it, and also the fear of violating it. And now he brings a chapter in which he provides clear proof that calling to a Tawheed is also what? Mandatory and highly virtuous. Mandatory and highly virtuous. And this is so that the person will not suffice himself with being a muwahhid, with being a person of a Tawheed. But beyond that, beyond being a person of Tawheed himself, he will also be motivated to do what? To invite others to a Tawheed. To invite others to a Tawheed. So it's as if the Imam is saying, O muwahhid, once you have understood and practiced the Tawheed, and you have feared and shunned its opposite, a shirk, don't stop there. Be from the people who invite and educate others about a Tawheed. Be from the people who want, they are from du'at at-Tawheed, the people who spread a Tawheed and call people to a Tawheed. Don't stop with knowing it yourself, but be from the people who invite others. So he brings this chapter in which he will provide us with adillah, which show the virtue, the merit, and the obligation to call to a Tawheed. So the first dalil he brings is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in which he said, قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ عَلَى بَصِيرًا أَنَا وَمَنِ اتَّبَعَنِي. So he says, say, this is my way. I invite unto Allah upon basira. I and those who truly follow me. And I am not from the idolaters. Surah Yusuf, the 12th surah, verse 108. Surah Yusuf, the 12th surah, verse 108. So he says, قُلْ هَذِهِ سَبِيلِي. Say, this is my path. أَدْعُو إِلَى اللَّهِ. I invite unto Allah. I invite unto Allah means what? I invite to Tawhidillah. I invite to the oneness of Allah. I call to a Tawheed. عَلَى بَصِيرَةٍ. Upon basira. What's the meaning of basira, huna? Here, al-basira, it means sound knowledge. Sound knowledge. Right? Sound and credible knowledge. That's the meaning of al-basira. And this knowledge is three types for the da'i. The first knowledge is al-ilm bima yad'u ilay. Knowledge of that to which he calls. So before he can call, he has to what? He has to be knowledge about that to which he calls. So if he calls to Allah, he has to be knowledgeable about Allah. If he calls to a salat, he has to be knowledgeable about a salat. Whatever he calls to, he has to be knowledgeable about it. Al-ilmu bima yad'u ilay. The second knowledge is al-ilmu bi kayfiyat ad-da'wa. Kayfa yad'u. He has to be knowledgeable about how to call. Islam has given us what? A method of calling, a means, a way, a framework, a methodology. He has to know that methodology so he can follow it and not create his own methodology. Kayfiyat ad-da'wa. Then after that, he has to have what? Al-ilm bihal al-mad'u. He has to know the condition of the one he calls, so he can call him in the way which is appropriate and suitable for that one, that particular person. So these are the three types of knowledge which are included in the statement of Allah, ala basira, upon knowledge. Knowledge, bima yad'u ilay, knowledge of that to which he calls. Wal ilmu bi kayfiyat ad-da'wa, knowledge with what? The way to give da'wah, or knowledge of the way to give da'wah. Wal ilmu bihal al-mad'u, and knowledge of what? The condition of the one he calls. Then he says, Ana wa man ittaba'ani. I and those who follow me. So this is the Prophet's call. The call to a tawheed upon sound knowledge is his what? Is his call. Not just his call, but the call of those who truly follow him. So if a person wants to be a true follower of the Prophet ﷺ, especially when it comes to a da'wah, then he has to call the way the Prophet called, as he called, and called to what he called to. And the Prophet called primarily to what? At-Tawhid. That's why he says, Ana, I do this, and those who follow me. Okay, I call to a Tawhid, and those who follow me call to a Tawhid as well. So if we truly follow the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, when we give da'wah primarily to a Tawhid. Doesn't mean exclusively to a Tawhid, but primarily to a Tawhid, first and foremost. طيب, ثم بعد ذلك, the Shaykh, he brings the hadith, the famous hadith of Ibn Abbas. And this is the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen to call the people of Yemen to Islam. And the people of Yemen at that time were primarily Christians. They were primarily Christians. So he sends Mu'adh to Yemen, and he says to him, Ya Mu'adh, innaka ta'ti qawman ahla kitab. O Mu'adh, you're going to go to some people from the people of the book. فَلْيَكُنْ أَوَّلْ مَا تَدْعُوهُمْ إِلَيْهِ. So let the first thing you call them to be, and there are two versions of this part of the hadith. The first one, shahadatu an la ilaha illallah, the testimony that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, wa anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. The second version is an yuwahidullah ta'ala, that they single out Allah. They make Allah what? They make him one. Okay? Or that you call him to the oneness of Allah, is another way to say it. Two versions of the hadith. So notice, in this hadith, the hadith also goes on, the Prophet said, فَإِنْ أَطَاعُوا لَكَ بِذَلِكَ. So if they obey you in that, فَأَخْبِرْهُمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ قَدْ فَرَضَ عَلَيْهِمْ خَمْسَ صَلَوَاتٍ فِي كُلِّ يَوْمٍ وَلَيْلَةٍ. If they obey you in that one, at-Tawhid, then tell them about what? As-Salat. Then if they obey you in Salat, tell them about as-Zakat. So notice when the Prophet sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal to al-Yemen, in a nutshell, he told him to begin with what? With a Tawhid. Okay? Make your da'wah to what? A Tawhid. Make your primary focus a Tawhid. And don't, la tatajawaz, don't go past the Tawhid until what? Until they've embraced it. Till they understood it and embraced it. Once they've understood and embraced it, then you can tell them what? The other aspects of the deen. So this is another evidence that what? The da'wah should be to what? A Tawhid. Now, here I want to mention quickly that it's not uncommon to hear nowadays, why should we call to a Tawhid? What's the proof for this concept? What's the proof for this love? Even the word, the term. What's the basis for you even using this term, at-Tawhid? We don't find this in the Quran, we don't find it in the Sunnah. That's what they say. But our response to that is la. It is found in the Sunnah. It's found the Sunnah bil-Ishara. It's found in the Sunnah with what? With allusion. Without a direct mention. And it's also found the Sunnah with a direct mention. So as far as the allusion, alluding to it, we find in this hadith, or one of the versions of this hadith, when the Prophet said, "En yuwahidullah ta'ala." He said that they single out Allah, they make Him one. Yuwahid is the verb that the masdar at-Tawhid comes from, isn't it? So that's an allusion to the fact that what? This concept of Tawhid is what? Is a valid concept. The term is a valid term. Not only that though, we have something which is even more specific, which leaves no ambiguity that this word at-Tawhid, this term, is a valid Islamic term. And that's the hadith collected by Muslim on the authority of Jabir, who described the Prophet's pilgrimage. How did the Prophet make Hajj? So as he's describing it, he starts from the very beginning, and then he gets to the point where the Prophet does what? Where the Prophet enters the state of Ihram, and he's going to make the Talbiyah. You guys know Talbiyah, right? The Talbiyah is when the person is going to perform the nusuk, the ritual. He says, "Labbaik Allahumma labbaik." Okay, well after he finishes making that statement, then he what? He makes a Talbiyah, the Talbiyah. He's always repeat this Talbiyah. So labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka, labbaik. So he says, "Here I am in devotion. Here I am in devotion, O Allah. Labbaik laka la sharika laka." I'm sorry, labbaik la sharika laka, labbaik. So he says, "Here I am, devoted. You have no partner. There's no partner that with you. There's no rival with you. Here I am in devotion." So he made this. So that Jabir gets to the point where he's going to describe this Talbiyah, and he says, he says, "Thumma ahalla bit-Tawhid. Thumma ahalla bit-Tawhid." Meaning, then he proclaimed the Talbiyah in a monotheistic manner, in a manner which was what? Indicative of what? Of the oneness of Allah. Why does Jabir say that? Because the pagans, they also have a Talbiyah. They also have a statement that they make to express their devotion during the ritual of Hajj and Umrah. But what they would say contained a shirk. So they start out just like we do. Labbaika Allahumma labbaik. Labbaika la sharika laka labbaik. But then after that they say, La sharika laka illa huwa lak. Tamlikuhu wa ma malak. You don't have any partner except the partners that you have. You don't have any partners except the partners that you have. I mean, there are some partners. Tamlikuhu, you own those partners and whatever they own. But we admit that you do have partners. So when the Prophet ﷺ, when he made the Talbiyah, he did what? He removed this part of the Talbiyah that they say, which contains a shirk. And that's what Jabir meant when he said, وَهَلَّ بِالتَّوْحِيدِ or ثُمَّ هَلَّ بِالتَّوْحِيدِ. That he made a Talbiyah, but his Talbiyah was what? A Talbiyah which contained no shirk, and it singled out Allah. But notice Jabir used what word? At-Tawhid. So the word Tawhid has been used from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So there's no issue with this term. I just thought that was important to point out because you're going to hear people say that there's no basis for this term. ثم بعد ذلك we come to the last hadith, or the last evidence that the Sheikh mentioned regarding the virtue, the merit, the excellence of calling to at-Tawhid. So he mentions the hadith of Sa'd ibn Sa'd. And what I'll do is I'll read it quickly in English, and then we'll just make our comments, and we'll close after that. So he says, on the day of Khaybar, Allah's Messenger ﷺ asserted, tomorrow I shall indeed give the flag to a person who loves Allah and His Messenger, and is loved by Allah and His Messenger. Allah will grant victory under his leadership. The people spent the whole night absorbed in discussing as to whom might the flag be given, as to whom the flag might be given. In the morning, they came eagerly to Allah's Messenger ﷺ, each of them hoping to be given the flag. Allah's Messenger asked, "Where is Ali ibn Abi Talib?" They replied, "He is suffering from an eye ailment." He was sent for and brought. Allah's Messenger then spat in his eyes and prayed for him, whereupon he was cured as if he had no previous pains. So now we stop here. Who did the Prophet give the raya to? Ali ibn Abi Talib. So one of the fawaid of this hadith is it teaches us the virtue, the merit, the excellence, the superiority of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And one of his merits is that he loves Allah and Allah loves him. Which one is more important? That he loves Allah or that Allah loves him? That Allah loves him. As Ibn al-Qayyim, he said, لَيْسَ الشَّأْنُ أَن تُحِبَّ اللَّهِ. He said, the matter is not that you love Allah, but الشَّأْنُ كُلُّ الشَّأْنِ. He said, nay, the matter in its entirety, and يُحِبَّكَ Allah, that Allah loves you. That's what we need to strive for. Strive that Allah would what? Love us. Okay? And this is one of the virtues of Ali ibn Abi Talib, that Allah loves him. ثم بعد ذلك, the Prophet then gave him some commands, gave him some advice, some instructions, some directives about how to conduct his campaign. So he gave him the flag and he said, advance with ease and gentleness until you arrive in their midst. Then call them to Islam and inform them of their duties to Allah in Islam. So he said, "Udu'uhu ila at-Tawhid, or udu'uhu udu'uhum ila Islam, or udu'uhum ila Allah." So he told him to call to what? To Allah. First and foremost, he should call to what? To Allah. And so this shows us the virtue and merit of at-Tawhid from two angles. From two angles. The first angle is that the Prophet told him to do what? To begin with it. To make this what? The start of your da'wah. When you get there and you're going to fight these people, before you fight them, call them to what? To at-Tawhid. Call them to the oneness of Allah. The second indication of the virtue of this calling to at-Tawhid is what he told Ali after that. He said, by Allah, he said, Wallahi, لَأَنْ يَهْدِيَ اللَّهُ بِكَ رَجُلًا وَاحِدًا خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنْ حُمُرٍ النَّعَمِ. He said, by Allah, if he guides through you a single man to Islam, then it's better for you than the red camels. Red camels, this is like a method in Arabic, an example in Arabic which is used to indicate what? The best type of wealth, or the best thing that a person could what? To aspire to possess. So in this way the Prophet is informing us of the merit of Tawheed, that if one person, just one person, were to be guided by any one of us, it will be more beloved to Allah than the best of what can be possessed in this world. And it will be better for us than the best things that we cherish. So whatever it is that you cherish, whatever thing from this dunya that you love, and you consider it the most precious and valuable thing, then guiding one person to Islam is better than what? Is better than that. Is better than that. So this is another indication of what the virtue and the merit and the excellence of what this call to a Tawheed. Don't suffice yourself with knowing a Tawheed. Be the person who invites others. And before I conclude, I want to mention one thing. The Imam, at the end of every chapter, he says, Fihi Masail. he says this chapter contains some noteworthy points, and he'll mention these points. He'll mention them like in bullet form. And so one of the points he mentioned after this chapter is he said, فيه التنبيه على الإخلاص لأن كثيرا من الناس لو دعا إلى الحق فهو يدعو إلى نفسه. He said it comprises a notice regarding sincerity, purity of intention. Because many people presume to call to truth, but in reality, they merely call to themselves. And this is important, ya ikhwani, because it teaches us one of the critical components of a da'wah al-Tawhid, but not just da'wah al-Tawhid, but every act of worship, every good deed, is this ikhlas, this purity of intention. And trying to remove any corruption, any hidden agendas from our intention. And as I said, this is not specific to a da'wah, but rather it's related to everything that has some relation to the deen. It's applicable to everything that has any relation to the deen. That we need to take a step back and really scrutinize our intention and make sure that our intention is free of any corruption. That any corruption in our intention, we remove it before we do the act, before we proceed. And I want to give one example, or I want to take one example from the deen, and that's the example of a nasiha, the example of giving advice, the example of giving advice. That when we're going to give advice to someone, it's critical that we remove ourselves from what? From the equation. That we remove our desires, our agenda, what we want from what? From the equation. And we advise with that which is most beneficial to us or to the person we advise. To the person we advise. And this is one of the key meanings, as the scholars have mentioned, of the word an-nasiha. That an-nasiha, it has the meaning of what? It has the meaning of what? Islah al-ghayr. Rectifying the person, doing what is in the best interest of the what? Of the other person. That's one of the meanings of a nasiha. And how can you do that if when you give advice, you have yourself in the equation, you have what you want. And at the end of the day, whatever advice you give is that which is ultimately going to be what? In your best interest. That's not a nasiha. And that's a corrupt intention. And it happens without us, what sometimes happens without us even realizing it. Because we're not mindful. That's why we have to be mindful. When we give a nasiha, just like when we give da'wah, just like when we pray, everything we do, we have to be what? Mindful. But this is one of those instances when we give a nasiha, when we put ourselves in the equation, and we think about ourselves instead of thinking about what? What's right by Allah and what's best for the person. I'll give you some examples. Let's say, for example, you have husband and wife, and they've been saving for some time for a vacation. They're going to go on a nice vacation to some nice spot, and he's going to spend a lot of money on her and pamper her and everything, right? Okay? Because she deserves it. But then, shortly before they're going to actually go on the trip, the masjid announces that they're going to do some expansion. They're going to do some renovations and some expansion that's desperately needed. Okay? And so the husband, because he's so haris, he's so keen to do good, he comes home to the wife and says, you know, I think we should donate part of the money that we've saved to this masjid project. And he starts mentioning all the virtues of the one who builds a masjid and, you know, the one who contributes to a masjid. And we can get these virtues and merits if we sincerely give this money or part of this money to the masjid. So the wife, you know, she's not really feeling that, because she's been waiting for this vacation where she's going to be pampered, etc. So now in response to him quoting all the ayat about the virtue of charity, charitable donations, giving to masajid, she starts quoting how what? How a husband is what? الرِّجَالُ قَوَّامُونَ النِّسَاءِ. And how the Prophet said, إِبْدَأْ بِنَفْسِكَ ثُمَّ مَنْ تَعُولُ. So she says, she recites the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, men are the protectors and maintainers of women. And the Prophet said, إِبْدَأْ بِنَفْسِكَ ثُمَّ مَنْ تَعُولُ. Start with yourself, and then those who are under your care, meaning your wife and your children. So when you're going to spend money, you have to start with me and this, that, and the other. Now I'm going to ask you honestly, Akhwani, when she's saying these things, she's saying haqq.
Yes.
She's saying haqq. What she's saying is truth. There's no question about it. It's not an issue of true or false. It's true. But the motive for saying it, is the motive for saying it what's in the best interest of her husband? Evident. What's in the best interest of her husband, especially we're talking about long-term interest, not short-term interest, long-term interest, is for him to give what? Give that money. Give it for the sake of Allah. Right? But her interest, tell her what? No, don't give, please don't give. You follow that? You guys see that? Yeah. And in her mind, she's convinced, I'm telling you haqq. I'm telling you what the deen says. Yeah, but you got to look at what? The intention. You have to remove yourself from the equation. As if this were your neighbors. And the qadiyya, the issue was brought to you and you have nothing to do with it. How would you judge then? You follow me? You have to take yourself out of the equation. Give you another example. Another husband and wife example. Let's say you have a wife and, she has high school education. That's it. Married to her husband, and now she wants to, and they're starting to have children, have small children. And the wife is concerned that if I don't educate myself, if I don't do something to increase my knowledge, not just of secular studies, but also religious knowledge, I won't be of any use to my children. I won't be able to teach them. They'll come home with homework, and I won't be able to help with their homework. They'll ask them about the deen, and I won't be able to teach them about the deen. So she has good intentions why she wants to go and what? Maybe do some secular studies, and also do some Islamic studies. They have all these programs online, online universities, etc. So she comes to the husband, and the husband feels a little bit intimidated, feels a little threatened. That, okay, if she starts, studying and learning, and, maybe she'll be more knowledgeable than me. Maybe she'll start telling me things, correcting me about things. Or even worse, she won't be dependent upon me. You guys understand that? She won't be dependent. She has an education, she has a degree. If she doesn't like me anymore, she can leave me and go get a job, right? So maybe these thoughts are in his mind, so he starts telling, the place of a woman is in the home. And the most important thing is that you take care of the home, you take care of your husband. That's your primary responsibility. And all these other things, you don't need to worry about that. There's always Sunday school, and there's always, something going on in the masjid that they can learn, etc. If they have a problem with homework, we'll get them a tutor. He starts saying these things, okay? And she says, it's not good for a woman to be ignorant. It's not good for a woman not to be teach her children. She mentions, for example, in the poet in which he said, إِذَا النِّسَاء نَشَأْنَ فِي أُمِّيَّةٍ رَضِيَ الرِّجَالُ جَهَالَةً وَخُمُولًا. If women are raised up in illiteracy, men will breastfeed from them. They will basically take from them, inherit from them, jahalatan, ignorance, wa khumula, and laziness. Right? So she says, this is the reality. If we look around, look at the women who are ignorant in our community, and look at their children. Right? They're lost. They're out there. But look at the women who know a little something. Their children are doing good in school, and their children are what? Practicing their deen, etc. So now, did the husband say something that was batil? Did he say something which was haqq or batil? Haqq. The wife, did she say something which was haqq or batil? But when the husband said what he said, did he remove himself from the equation? He thought about his own interest. Now it was in the best interest of her and in the best interest of the children. So this is the thing, when given a nasiha, that sincerity, the person has to remove himself from the equation and has to strive to purify the intention and remove any corruption from the intention. It's not easy, ikhwan. It's a struggle, to the point that the early Muslims used to say the hardest thing is a niyyah. The hardest thing is a niyyah. Because to purify that niyyah, and it's what? It's susceptible to change. You might start out with a pure intention. And then what? Your intention gets corrupted, so you have to keep revisiting it. Keep revising your intention. So I just wanted to mention that because it's very important, ya ikhwani, this ikhlas in everything we do, but especially when it comes to what a da'wah ila Allah, because many people, they have a tendency to what? To call to themselves, not to call to Allah. And also when it comes to what? A nasiha. We put ourselves in the equation, what's in our best interest, and what's in the best interest of what the person we're giving advice to. And it even happens with teacher and student, and I've experienced this myself. Where you have a teacher who you sit with, and you benefit from them, and you like them, and then you hear about another teacher who teaches another subject. And you want to go sit in his circle. And your teacher discourages you. Because he fears that what? You'll become enamored with the other teacher and you'll start coming to his lesson. So he discourages you. Oh, you don't want to go over there. You don't want to do that. You don't want to even study that right now. You're not even ready for that right now. He discourages you. Not because you're not really ready. Because he fears what? That you will leave him. Or you will move on from him. Is he giving you advice that's in your best interest? Giving you advice that's in his best interest. So that's something to think about, ya ikhwani. Something to think about. Any questions, ya ikhwan? Any questions, ikhwan, akhawat? Fi shay? Going once? Going twice? Inshallah, we'll resume next week. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka nabi Muhammad. بارك الله فيك يا شيخ.